Hi, hello, I'm Ariam, and this is a series reading vlog for the Vows and Honor series by Mercedes Lackey. So this is a prequel series for a book from the Valdemar world. Obviously, this also happens in the Valdemar world, and we follow two women, and it's basically a classic sword and sorcery novel, but it follows women. That's what I believe Mercedes Lackey wanted to do. And I thought I'd be going into this, and it would be easy. I would just be reading a duology. No. There's a book of short stories, but the short stories are interwoven. So someone very nice in the Valdemar wiki made the list of how you're supposed to read this. So first you're supposed to read a short story, then you read chapters 1 to 3 of one of the first novel, then a short story in chapters 4 to 5, then a short story, then another short, then three short stories, then chapter 6, uh, then another short story, chapter 7 to 8, another short story, chapters 9 to 11, another short story, then the whole second novel, and then three more short stories, and then the book that the series is a prequel to. So I'll be starting by reading the first short story. Oh, right, and today is November 30th. Hi, hello. So now it's like 13 hours later, and I read the first short story and then moved to the first three chapters of the first book. So I read the first short story, which was an Oathblood, and then moved to the first three chapters of Oathbound, as I was told to by whoever put together that chronological reading order. Thank you, random person on the internet. So mostly I've really been enjoying it. The short story is sorry, I'm apologizing. I'm on a cough. Anyways, the first short story is a rape revenge story, which was very popular in the time that this was being published, but which I don't like because they tend to be very, very graphic with the rape, and that was true for the first half of the story, which I did not like for exactly that reason. However, I did really enjoy the second part of the story. It was very much a montage, which is the thing Mercedes Lackey really likes doing, and I think that, and generally I don't really like montages, but with Mercedes Lackey, I think it is a thing that she actually does really, really well, because she'll give you like all these little bits and pieces, but she knows exactly what the important part is, you know? Like, and that important part will also not only show us the important part, but it will also show us like all of the past stuff. Like in movies, montages are okay because you actually get to see like every little detail, and in books they're less fun because you don't get to see the details. But I feel like Mercedes Lackey generally balances it really, really well. So I would love to see more of what Talia's classes would have looked like, but that would have made Hours of the Queen absurdly long. So that's the first short story, and then you move on to the first three chapters of Oathbound, which I definitely really enjoyed. However, I'm like, there's, I feel like there's, okay, yes, there is a way to read it without having read the first short story, but I feel like reading the first short story adds a lot. And I do feel like I do already have a complaint that there was too much time because the first short story was separate from the book. There was too much time that was just like, oh yeah, they were traveling and they never talked to each other once. Like they talked to each other, but they didn't talk to each other about like deeper things. And suddenly, like, it all happens. They start talking to each other, but then we actually start getting into their adventures. And so far, as is common with the first book in a Mercedes Lackey book, in a Mercedes Lackey series, and I think this is actually probably going to be true for the whole of this book and for the short stories. Wait, let me get into what I'm saying. There is no plot. This is just adventures. And yes, it's building up little bits of plot, but until I read the second book, and I believe the second book will have all the plot in it, I have no idea what the plot's going to be. Once I read the second book, I'll look back at the first book and I'll be like, oh, this bit was building up to this plot, this bit was building up to this. But right now, I honestly have no idea. And actually, I'm so early into the book that there's probably nothing here No, actually there is. There are a few bits that I can point out and be like, oh, that's probably going to be plot for the second book. But yeah, that's just how Mercedes LeKay writes. Um, I quite enjoy it personally because I really like character development, and you can get, or I really like, not even character development, just like really diving deep into who these characters are, and I think that's like funner to do when you're not having plot, plot, plot. I'm personally less of a plot fan, uh, so I personally like it. I can understand why people would not like this style of writing. But yeah, that's all. Hey, it is December 1st, the evening of December 1st, and I have read another short story, two chapters, and another short story from the Vows and Honors series. So, yeah, I definitely did not feel like these two short stories that I read were definitely not like needed to continue the book. Like the first short story that happens before the book starts, that's needed to understand the book. These two short stories, they're just like little adventures. You don't actually need to read them to enjoy the book. However, I did not feel like as I'm reading them, as they're short stories, and I'm reading like the book, and I'm reading them intervaled with the book according to the person who put together this list, what time, when exactly everything is happening, I definitely still feel like I don't feel like I'm going out of the book to read short stories. Like, it definitely feels like I'm just reading the book, and there are, among other things, these adventures that happen, mostly because this is a book about adventures. And so, what did I think of everything? So, the first short story, it was alright. Like, it was alright. I honestly, the more I think about it, the less I like it because I just, it felt like if it had been an actual chapter in the book, it could have been divided into two chapters or more likely been a longer chapter, and then we could have gotten a more Mercedes LeKay ending. At the same time, this was still a very Mercedes LeKay ending. Like, I don't want to get into how. Okay, I'll put it together. The character. So basically, Cat 3, her sword, calls to her to save women who need help being saved. Um, and it calls to her to help save this woman, and this woman is incredibly selfish, and she doesn't think about other people. She only thinks about herself. At the same, so on one hand, it was a Mercedes LeKay ending that she got the bad ending, that Mercedes LeKay is always going to give the selfish people the bad ending, right? The whole thing about Voldemort is like the hero's arc, people who care about other people. Like, the selfish people always get the bad endings. They're always the villains. Like, that's their main trait, that they're selfish or don't think about others. However, on the other hand, it was like extremely clear that she had mental health problems, and and the other hand, and that's where I would think that if it were in the book, it would have made a longer chapter to get a better ending for this character, because Mercedes LeKay is like all there for people who have mental health problems, not necessarily in a nice way. How do I explain that? I'm thinking not nice but kind is what I'm thinking, though I do not always agree with her. Um, but yeah, she definitely is like, in this case, I feel like I'm just thinking about a different incident, kind of similar incident in a different book, where a character's kind of similar, but not quite to this one, got a much better ending. Anyways, the other thing that has been bothering me since reading that story, and for some reason did not bother me up until now, including when I read the book that this series is a prequel to, is how exactly, excuse me, how exactly does this sword work? Like, you go into a city, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of women who need help. Like, how can you ever get out of that? So, yeah, that's been bothering me. Then, as I said, I read two chapters from the book. Um, and I did enjoy them. I can say that I did enjoy the two chapters I read in the book more than both the short stories I read. So the two chapters in the book are, they finally reach the place one of the places they want to get, because this is very much like they're traveling from place to place in all these books and all these and throughout this book and these short stories. And yeah, it had some good character development. Like, I guess the thing about the short stories is going to be that they're just adventures and they're not going to have as much, if any, character development. Like the book is focused on character development, and there are adventures, and the short stories are adventures that may or may not have character development. So I do prefer the book to the short stories, but it doesn't feel like weird to switch between. Yeah, and then I read another short story, and yeah, it was okay. Like, I don't have any strong feelings about it. But yeah. Was there something else I wanted to say? I feel like there was something else I wanted to say, but I can't remember it. But I will add, now that I've been thinking, that in the book and the short stories, we are like these characters. I call it the Valdemar world because most of the books take place mainly or only in the country of Valdemar, but throughout different time periods. The world is actually called Velgarth, but this book, these stories are never going to enter Valdemar, as far as I know, and if they do, it will only be for a very tiny bit of time. So, yeah, it's really cool to see more of the world of Velgarth. Anyways, that is all for my update for now. I remembered what I wanted to say, and that is that there are some things that I believe these books were written in the early 90s, and so there are these things that in later series there is something that she like made better, and that is there is a species of intelligent animal, excuse me, called Kyrie. And they have three sexes, male, female, and neuter. And the neuters often, not super, super often, but they're the most likely of the three sexes to become like familiar slash companions of humans. And in this book, we get one that becomes one of our main characters' companions, and it's a neuter, but it uses he, him pronouns. And from the way it's written, it's very obviously like, well, its pronouns are degrading, which is understandable. Uh, but she obviously had like a little think, and in a much later series in this world, in the same world, we get a Kyrie who uses its pronouns and is like, and is kind of like being like, why would you not use its pronouns? Like that's just obviously what it's used to. Just a better thought out uh, thinking of what the society of of these Kyries would look like, you know? And I do wonder though, now that I thought of that, so one of our main characters in this book, in the series, is asexual, but she didn't used to be asexual. She took an oath on herself, a magical oath, and the magical oath also made her asexual. And in that later series I'm talking about, there's an asexual aromantic character who's just asexual aromantic. So I'm wondering if she was like looking at this series, which is still great, but was like, there are some things that are like, if I'd been writing this at a later time, I would have done better and added them to that series, like change them in that series. Okay, hello. It is December 2nd, and let's do an update. So, what did I read? Um, Actually, last night I ended up reading another short story. Then there's a short story that I skipped because, as far as I can tell, it's not canon at all. So I just skipped it. Then I read another short story, which was actually not in the short story book. I had to download another collection of Voldemort short stories to read that. Luckily, libraries exist. Thank you, libraries. Um, Then I read another chapter, and now I am in the middle of another chapter. And I am definitely coming closer to the end, which does feel good because, well, it doesn't, as I said, it doesn't feel weird. It doesn't feel like I'm not reading a book to jump between the main novel. We'll get into the novel in a bit, and the short story collection. Um, it does make it feel like I read so much. Why am I only X% through the book? Like this morning, I was looking at the book, or last night, I was looking at the book. I was like, I'm only 40. Yes, this morning, I'm only 44% of the way through. That's crazy because it feels like it should be longer because I did read more pages, right? But on the Kindle app, obviously it says no, you're only 44% of the way through. Now I'm 60 something percent, and it does feel more accurate. Now, this is going to be a complaining session, and I want to preface, and I will also end this with this too. I am enjoying this book, but I do need a little complaining session because it is not perfect. And we will start with the novel because that's like the thing that I'm least complaining about. While I did say a few times that this is like adventures put together, however, the first half of this book, or the first 44%, did feel more like a novel. Like, yes, it's adventures put together, but they're put together into a novel format. Now, the parts I'm reading now do feel more like short stories. Like, I'm just reading a short story book. Like, just like the other one is a collection of short stories, this one is also a collection of short stories at this point. And honestly, what's kind of funny is I've gotten to the point after 44%, you get to the point where a lot of the chapters that appear in the novel appear as slightly edited short stories in the short story collection, and honestly, sometimes they're not even that edited in the novel. Like, it will just like the first 44%, it was only from our two main characters, Tarma and Kethri's point of views. Wait, let me drink. Thank you. The first 44% was only from our main characters, Tarma and Kethri's points of view, and suddenly we'll be getting like points of view from like the person who's hiring them, and it feels. And yeah, I do wish it had stayed more in the novel format. While I'm still enjoying it, I'm still like, oh my god, why am I in a statistics class? I would rather be reading this. Well, I would rather be doing almost anything than statistics class, but you get my point. I am enjoying it, and like I do want to read it, but I do prefer the novel format over the short story format. So that's my first complaint, and as I said, that one is very minor. Now, another minor complaint that doesn't even have anything to do with the book is that the short stories d- the short stories I read before chapter 6 actually happened within chapter 6, and the person who put together was wonderful. It just, for me, it was kind of like I'm the person who would rather it's after chapter 6 that disturbs me less. If I like read chapter 6, which was still continuing the novel format at that point, and then read the short stories that take place within chapter 6. Obviously, the person who put together this list was a person who would have preferred to read it before and then again, which is just personal preference. It just kind of annoyed me. And then the last thing, that this is actually a real complaint. Like, this is actually like an actual writing complaint and not just the format of the book or the format of the list that the person put together, who is an amazing person, and I'm very grateful to them. Anyways, so there is this one incident that was so tiny, it didn't even need to be written. Like, there was like one chapter where I did feel like I was like, I mentioned before that I prefer less montages than Mercedes located, and I got to it and I was like, go back to your montages. We're getting too much detail. So that's my first writing complaint, and the other writing complaint that I have, specifically also from there, and maybe this is why I felt we were getting too much detail, besides the fact that there was like a bunch of very short incidents altogether, but that were gone into detail, and that is that there is this kind of tension where our main characters, on one hand, do not believe in arranged marriages for children and consider it rape, and on the other hand, live in a world where arranged marriages are extremely common, and so they actually view the cheating of an extremely young wife, like in her late teens, like very late teens to early 20s, I would assume, maybe early 20s and mid 20s, but I would guess more early 20s, to a man in like his 50s or 60s. They see her as cheating like as bad, and they like him. Like, that tension just did not sit well with me. Like, between, like, if I feel like I could almost get it more if they were okay with child marriage and just against rape specifically, than if they're okay with child, then if they're not okay with child marriage, but are against, but and immediately view any child marriage as rape, but are against, like, I don't know, it just, the tension between that, what's happening in the book, and our modern world and modern sensibilities. What am I saying modern? Like, look what's happening in Somalia right now. It is December 2nd, by the way, if you want to look up what happened in December, in early December, late November in Somalia to do with child marriages. Hi, yeah. Excuse me. I was sitting on my knees, now I'm squatting. That's better. Yeah, so that tension is frustrating the hell out of me. Like, my sensibilities and this fantasy world sensibilities are not adding up in a way that makes me feel like this fantasy world characters' sensibilities aren't making sense. At the same time, like, if I actually think about it, then I get it. Oh, another writing complaint. There was this one specific chapter where, like, you can tell that at some point this was just a bunch of short stories that she had already written that she put it together, and it was like she OOC'd our main characters. If you don't know what OC means, it means out of character. Like, she wrote our characters out of character for like a quarter of a chapter, and then everything went back to normal. I was like, what was that? That's not how Dharma behaves. That's not how Catherine behaves. That's not how Whirl, who is another character that you get to know, behaves. And then it all went back to normal, which is good. Now that's my complaining session over, and now I feel kind of bad because I complained for nearly 8 minutes, and like, as I said, I'm still really enjoying the book. It's just not perfect, and you can really divide, and also this complaining session, you can divide into complaints that are just like personal me and complaints that are like actual writing stuff. And even the thing about the tension is just personal me. Like, I said it was actual writing stuff, but like, the more I think about it, no, it's just me. It makes sense for these characters to think this way. Or like, I can understand why she wrote them thinking this way. Like, I can I can understand where their sensibilities are coming from, but yeah, so that's not even a real complaint. I'm gonna leave it in because I think it is important to, um how do I put this? Think about where you're coming from. Like, when you're reading a book, and I think you should know, like, yeah, like, everybody talks about like where the author is coming from, right? But the reader is coming from somewhere too. And the where the reader is coming from is going to influence how they read a book, right? Or anything. Like, I was also talking to a friend about this, that if you have two commentators on the Torah, you they even if they get to the same commentary, they will be coming from different paths, from the time they live in, from the community they live in, from their own personal life experiences, from their own personalities, you know? So, and the same goes for reading books. Like, that tension bothered me because of the place I live in, which is uh does not have arranged marriages. You know, like, I did not live in a community and never lived in a community that has arranged marriages. Um, and from the time I live in, time and place together, because obviously there are still places in the world that have arranged marriages and child marriages. Um, from my own personal life experiences, or in this case, rather, the life experiences that people told me, and obviously my own personality. And these are all, and like, this case was super like standing out. But in any case, like, that's how I'm going to read the whole book. And I haven't talked about it, but I've thought a lot, like, it really annoys me. I haven't talked about it on the internet, but I've talked about it with people. That it really annoys me when people give bad reviews for books that are based on their own, excuse me, personal preferences. And like, I don't mean like, and that's what I just almost did. So I just almost really, really annoyed myself. But yeah, like, people will be like, I don't mind it like as much when you're see that someone is still super super traumatized while they're giving the review, and you're like, okay, you're super traumatized, you're not seeing this through clear lens. But at some point you have to learn to think about yourself and how you're reflecting on what you're reading. And if you, and like, and the thing is though, it's hard to like divide, right? Because I would never, I can understand why people do not like the first book in this whole world. Like, I can really understand it. Um, and I know that the reasons I liked it, part of it has to do with who I am as a person. So like it's hard to divide, but at the same time, if you're reading a horror book and you're like, I hate this because it had horror, which let me tell you, when I was in a reading group that read Mexican Gothic and everyone was reacting, oh my god, the mushrooms are so creepy, I hate this. Like at that point, maybe it's you and it's not the book. Like, but it's hard to separate. Like my personal preference, where does it end? Like obviously, like where do I draw the line? Because obviously my personal preference, I have no water left, so you're just going to deal with me talking and coughing, is for fantasy. And I love talking swords, which, or not talking swords, actually. I love magic swords, whether they're of the talking variety or not, which is because, and I love female heroines in fantasy who can fight and also do things that are not fighting, that are clever and intelligent. And that's what this book has. And obviously there are books like that are horribly written, right? But I mean, I don't give out star ratings anymore, but if I did give out this book a star rating, I would give it a much higher rating than someone who read this and their personal preference isn't travel stories. I love books that take you on that the characters just move from place to place. I know so many people do not like that, And the question is like, where does my personal preference end? Because like there's a point where you're gonna pinpoint everything basically, right? So anyways, that's the question of the day. See you later. Hey, it is the evening of December 3rd and I've decided to DNF the book. But before I get into why, no, you know what? I'll get into why first, okay? So I have 3 chapters left. Actually, 2 and a bit. Really, I've only got like 5 pages left in the third chapter, and Mercedes' like Cage chapters are long. Um, the thing is, the plot right now, and from what I know is the plot is going to be, I know what character it's focused on. So the plot right now, what it's going to be till the end of the book, is very focused on rape. And even when I skip over the graphic descriptions, I still come into just like talking about rape, 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 and I don't want to read that. That's not for me. So, yeah. So it's a problem. It's not even a problem with the book. It's just a problem. I wouldn't say it's a problem with me. That's not what I want to read. So. Um, but let's get into, before I decided to DNF the book, and I'm not DNFing the series, okay? That's important. I DNF'd, excuse me, sorry. I DNF'd the book, The Oathbound, but I'm still planning to read The Oathbreakers and finish the short stories. So, speaking of, I did finish one short story before I went back to reading the book and then decided to DNF it. And and while alone, I wouldn't have liked the story. In the greater context of the book, of just because it was like a lighthearted story and then immediately goes to grim things, I think I liked it more. But yeah, and then I do have another thing I want to say. Do you remember how in the last update I talked for like 13 minutes about how we reflect on the books we read? Well, I want to talk about with the author because actually I think my first opinion about the tension of what was happening there, what that it was bad writing, I think it was correct because now I got to a part. Um, Actually, before the short story, I finished a chapter and a half, and then I read a short story, and then I read nearly another chapter, and it was the last chapters that were getting into that arc. And after the short story, which is when I decided to DNF. Anyways, in the chapters before the short story that I was reading, our main characters make a decision that comes from that they're supposed to be heroes, right? And they're not written to be morally gray in any way. They're written to be white. And God, sorry. They are written to be heroes. Let's erase that sentence. They are written to be heroes. Yeah. We don't have to talk about that sentence and go very into deep dive into it, partially because I do not know enough. But anyways, they are not written to be morally gray. They are written to be heroes. And they do something that is so morally gray that I personally, I'd argue it's totally out of the gray and into the villainous and into the villainous. I could see some people saying it's extremely gray. Like I could see an argument that I'd accept for it's super dark gray. But yeah. But the thing is, Mercedes LeKay has often in her early writing, you will come, which this is one of them, you will come across a very black white worldview. The heroes are the heroes, the bad guys are the bad guys, and so essentially the heroes cannot do anything wrong. It happens also in the Hours of the Queen series, in the second book. It annoyed where a character is a hero, but he's really bad at teaching, but we're supposed to just like accept that his teaching is. I think that was actually better done because we're seeing it only through the eyes of a different character. But this who's but and I did like the first time I read it when I was like 14, 15, I was like, yeah, what is going on here? And the second time I read it, which was like a few months ago, so as an adult, I was like, okay, I can see why this character that we're seeing through her eyes chose to think about the teaching this way, or is thinking about the teaching this way, maybe not even choosing. But in this case, we're not seeing it through the eyes of any character. We are seeing it through the eyes of the author, and it's very black and white thinking. And yeah, they're doing something that's very gray, and I would argue villainous. And because they're heroes, the author can only see them as heroes. But that's my update, and I'm probably going to take a break because there are quite a few other books that I want to read this month, and then I will get back to you with God's help. Hey, it's December 29th, and I just started Oathbreakers, which is the book. And I have to say, I'm 22% of it into it, and I have to say I'm a bit nervous about it. And I honestly avoided starting it just because I DNF'd the first book, and I'm really not sure how I'm going to feel about this one. I did look at reviews actually, and on one hand, they aren't that great. On the other hand, it does have a 4.02 star rating, and it says that the rape and that there's much less rapes in general, and especially much, much less very descriptions of rape. So that's good. Yeah, so far it's just not been. So far, as I said, I've read 22%. It's just not something that I enjoy reading, but I did see on the reviews that, like, the first three chapters, I am most of the way, I believe, through the third chapter, or at least a good way into the third chapter, are that plot, and then it switches to a more intriguing plot. So, yeah, hopefully I like it. Hopefully I don't DNF it as well. Okay, hey, it is December 30th, and I am. Thank you, that's better. I am now 49% of the way through. I do plan to read a little more of this tonight, but I wanted to update you because I've read to the part where they're about to go to Valdemar. So, obviously, this whole world is based originally on most of the stories take place in Valdemar, so this is like an exciting moment. But I am enjoying it a lot more than I was. Like, as I said, I was not enjoying the beginning part at all. It was very boring to me. Not even because of the writing, just because I find the topic boring that I was writing about. But basically, I went back into it and it went back into a new topic. So, what is this book about? So, it's been a few good years, And Kethri and Tarma have joined a mercenary band. Their captain has to go back to her family's home to deal with some issues of succession. Her family is a royal family. Then she never comes back. She suddenly stops sending letters. So Tarma and Kethri are chosen to go find her. And yeah, so far it's been a bunch of political intrigue. But not actually no, not political intrigue. There has been political intrigue happening, but that's not what we're privy to. We're privy to Tarma and Kethri acting as spies. And I'm loving that. I'm finding it so fun. I just listen, the concept of spying, when people are spying in books, I love it. Okay? In fantasy books at least. I find it so fun. It's just the tension of watching our characters who we already know who they are. I don't like it when a book starts off with spies, but characters that we already know who they are and they have to pretend to be different and how they do that. And obviously the tension of, oh my gosh, what if they're caught? I find that so fun. And yeah, so that has been the second part of this book. And the third part, as I said, they are now leaving that situation because they have new leads on where their captain is, which might be Valdemar. So they are going to go into Valdemar, which is exciting because I guess because I believe no, that can't be. But anyways, I think this part at least might lead us to what happens in By the Sword, which is like about one of their granddaughters or great granddaughters or something like that. Yeah, so I'm excited, but I'm also nervous about them going into Baltimore because I don't know, because I guess because I feel like I'm excited, but I know there's no real good reason to be excited. That also makes me nervous. Hey, it is the 31st of December. It's pretty late. It's 11 o'clock, just past 11. And I wanted to update you that around 2 hours ago, I finished Oathbreakers. And as I said, there were a lot of bad reviews. And while I agree with some of the stuff in them, overall, I don't agree with them. Was this my favorite book ever? No. Not even my favorite Mercedes Laquet book ever. But, I mean, obviously not. But I overall really did enjoy it. Oh, that's much better lighting. Okay, so what do I agree with them on? I do agree with them that about the magic part. So Mercedes Laquet made up this thing that we have from the time of this person named Veniels, at the time of this person named Elspeth, that there's no magic in Valdemar. And she keeps on, and this book does happen in between the time of those two people. But the thing is, there are a few books that happen that she keeps on breaking her rules for how it works. Like she'll make up rules for how there's no magic in Valdemar, and then she'll break them, and then she'll make up new rules. You know, like she'll make up new rules and whatever, and she always breaks them. And I just expect it, and I don't really, and it's annoying, but like I don't really care anymore. There was another thing that kept on coming up in the reviews that the rape scenes were better than Oathbound, which you know that I DNF'd it because I didn't want to read the rape scenes, but they complained that there was still rape. Now, I disagree because while rape was mentioned, it wasn't in any detail, so I didn't mind. And like, I don't think that rape being part of story is a bad thing. You know, I think there was way too much of it in the first book for many reasons. Like almost it was acting as like the only bad thing that could happen to a woman almost. Um, but this one had it. There was, it was, it wasn't as much as it was in the other things, as the other books. So, and it was not detailed at all. It was just mentioned. So yeah, I disagree on that point. Um, what else? Yeah, but overall, I did like this book. I saw that people said that Tarma and Kethri are Mary Sue's. I think it's Mary Sue's honestly a bit of a super term, but I do get some characters that are like, oh, they're Mary Sue's, but I disagree with Tarma and Kethri. They each had to work for their individual attainments, and while we don't necessarily see all of that work because there are time jumps, we do see quite a lot of that work actually, and we do see them working for it. So I disagree that they're Mary Sue's. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just telling you what the bad reviews say, and then whether I agree or disagree with it. I'm not telling you what I enjoyed about the book because I already told you last time what I enjoyed about the book. Oh, Voldemort was not exciting really at all. It was, and they barely stayed there. And it used one of my least favorite tropes. Like I don't think there's anything actually wrong with that trope, but I don't like it. But then they went back to Rathwoman and they were spies again, and that was quite fun. Oh, there is one thing I want to add. I have never agreed fully with Mercedes Lacay's morals. There are many things that I do agree with her about, but there are a lot of things that are much deeper that I do not agree with her at all. And that has always been like that from the very first time I read Hours of the Queen at age 14. And yeah, and this book featured another one of the things was like, yeah, that goes fully against my morals. So, but, and even more so, like, I mentioned there being something in Oathbound that was against my morals, and this was like very, very similar. And basically, it's taking revenge, and I do not believe revenge. I do not believe in revenge. I don't think revenge is moral. I think if you need to um, do something to people who want to harm you, you have to stop them from harming you. That's fine, but you cannot go to revenge. I believe that very strongly, and yeah, I'll still read Mercedes Lacay's books. I'll still enjoy them, but I do not think she has good morals at all. Anyways, that's all for now. So I still do have the rest of the short stories left in the series in the short story book, which I've already forgotten what it's called. So see you. Hey, it is February 4th, and I am back on to reading Oathblood. So actually, there was a story that I needed to read before I started whatever the novel is called, Oathbreakers, right? And I didn't, so I read it now. It was fine. Like, obviously, it was actually kind of nice to read it now and have all the hints of, oh, they're going to try to join this mercenary band, and knowing from what I know, obviously from reading the book, that they had joined that mercenary band and what exactly had happened. And then I read another two stories. They were both okay. One of them was it was fine. It wasn't the best thing ever. The other one I actually really enjoyed, and the thing is, I only enjoyed it because I'm a nerd and because I like education. And it was really just about a specific way of horse training, of how to train a horse. And yes, our characters were doing stuff obviously, but it was really literally just about the specific way of training horses that Mercedes Lacay is obsessed with, and I understand why, and I really enjoyed that story. Now, what's left, I actually finished all the short stories, and there is one story left that's actually 100 pages, so it's more like a novella, and so I plan to start that today, but I doubt I'll finish it today. Hey, so it's actually later the same day, and I did end up finishing Oathblood. And yeah, I really enjoyed that last novella. It had very much was like the Mercedes Lacay tropes that I like, plus other tropes. Yeah, yeah, just the Mercedes Lacay tropes that I like. Um, so I enjoyed it a ton. I don't think I'm going to wrap up this vlog right here because technically I said I wasn't going to do By the Sword here, but technically the site that the Voldemort wiki says that because Tarma appears in the first half of the By the Sword, that is technically included as part of the cycle. So I have not decided yet if I'm going to include it here, but I'm not going to edit the blog quite yet until I decide. Okay, hey, so it is February 20th. I haven't started By the Sword yet, but I did see earlier that there was another short story about need that happens way earlier, like right after a few centuries earlier, and I decided to read it, of course. Um, a few centuries earlier to Dharma and Catherine. Can you tell I'm tired? Um, and so I read it. I didn't really like it, to be quite honest. Um, it felt like, hello, Kit Kat, just crawl up from under the blankets. But it felt like some readers had said, well, if Need only accepts a woman bearer, will she accept a trans woman who hasn't transitioned? And Mercedes, like, hey, just wanted to write a story to say yes, which, like, great, but the story itself, pretty boring. Like, what do I mean, pretty boring? It was okay, but it wasn't anything unexpected. It wasn't anything new, and at some point, it just became a poemless. Okay, it is February 21st, and I am 284 pages through By the Sword. But the thing that actually matters is that I finished the first part, which is the part with Tarma and Kestri. So, and that's all we're gonna vlog. Like, yes, I did add in that little short story yesterday. Never mind that. I just wanted to add it in. But yes, technically, the main thing that's important to us is Tarma and Kestri. And listen, well, two things that is what I'm missing. A, I read on the wiki, I finally read on the wiki how the sword Need was made. I don't know if that is word of God or if it just appeared in a book that I haven't read yet in the Valdemar series because it's so big. But I always really felt like I was missing how Need was made, and that did add, definitely. But what added even more, and the thing is, what I thought I was missing when I read this book first, because I didn't know until pretty recently that the Tarma and Kestri, that is the Vows and Honor series, existed. I just thought that what I'm missing, what Mercedes, like, hey, forgot to put in, is how the sword Need was made. And listen, that added a little, but I didn't really need that. I absolutely actually did not really need that. It helped. It definitely helped a little with understanding how Need kind of works. But no, what I needed, what I didn't know I was missing, is the whole history of Tarma and Kestri. Because this book actually needs you to read both the Vows and Honor series and the Hours of the Queen series before you go into it. I read that you need the Vows and Honor series to understand part one of this book. You need the... Am I in part two still? I think I'm still in part two. You need Hours of the Queen to start to understand around from halfway through this book. A little after, actually. So I had read the Hours of the Queen series, and that's honestly what I mainly remembered. I vaguely remembered a little bit of the beginning, but definitely did not remember all the details. I remembered much more of the end, and that's simply because I was missing such a giant part by not having read Vows and Honor. This is not a book. People say that you can go into it without reading Vows and Honor. I totally disagree. I was missing so much. Like, yes, you can kind of get past it, but it's not even a book where you're honestly, I was reading it, I was like, oh my god, I was so bewildered. How did I not realize that there was another series here that tells us who Tarma and Kestri are? Because we are just thrown into this, and Tarma and Kestri mention their history, they mention a bunch of things, and Carolyn doesn't really know their history, but they know it, and they say a bunch of things, and the book, like, mentions some things. It gives us Tarma's point of view as well. And she isn't explaining anything. Like, if this was a book where we weren't expected to know the Vows and Honor series, Tarma's point of view would explain to us things, right? That's how Mercedes, like, hey, works. But it doesn't explain to us things. And I was missing so much, and no wonder I forgot, basically, all the first part of this book. I actually literally forgot that Tarma and Kestri were at all in this book. I remembered that Carwyn got Need, obviously, and I remembered that she rescued her sister-in-law. That's not a spoiler. That's pretty obvious. That's going to happen from the summary of this book. But I did not remember that she met Catherine Tarma, much less spent years training with Tarma. And again, that's because I just didn't have the background knowledge, so I was totally bewildered what was going on. So, oh my gosh, I am so glad I finally read the Vows and Honor series, even just to understand the first part of this book, and it definitely made it so much better to actually understand what was going on. Now listen, that's the end of this vlog. This has been, I don't know if the vlog is going to be very long, I suspect it will be, but oh my gosh, it was months in the making, for sure. So, see you!